Hi guys, my name is Girish Belly, your host for today for Back to Basics. I hope you enjoyed last week's episode because I know I did. Now keep on commenting everywhere, good or bad, either way it will make my episodes stronger and I will keep on improving as much as I can. So today's episode, we're going to talk about entrepreneurship. What is that? We're going to talk about a little details about that, because when people they think of entrepreneurship, they think of we need new ideas, we need money, we need to be a leader to do all that. But then you know what? Maybe that's not it. We will just go to the basics of that and speak with Joel Primus. He has written a book called Getting Naked. Yeah, that's right. Getting Naked. That's weird, but we will talk about why naked, why not something else, why not clothing. We'll find that out. And Joel, thanks for coming on my show.
That's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So the first thing is, Joel, before we get into all the other basic questions, is what does back to basic mean to you?
Ooh, I mean, I think it's pretty relevant. We're seeing there's just so much coming at us, every one of us right now.
Yeah.
And I read about all these different marketing directors who are overwhelmed by the plethora of social media opportunities that they now have. A few years ago, it was 3 or 4 platforms that you had to post and engage across. And now it's, closer to 10. And our world was entirely shaken up. So I think a lot of people are looking at their lives and their careers and saying, what's that rock solid, more simplistic foundation that I can get back to and build my life personally and professionally from there? And so when I saw the title of your podcast, that's the first thing that came out to me was distilling, simplifying, letting go. Again, not just in a spiritual sense or a self-improvement sense, but just in a practical sense, so that we can get to a place where we can be really effective and then grow from there. Because when we get diversified across so many different things, we become ineffective as human beings. We become anxious, we become overwhelmed, we do too much multitasking, et cetera, so I really loved the name of your podcast, and was excited to talk about that.
Thank you so much for that. So Joel, when you first of all, what is naked? Let's talk about that.
I guess for me, it's what was Naked.
Okay.
Because Naked was an underwear company that I had built and sold over the course of about a 10-year period of time. And the reason it was called Naked was I wanted to create this pair of underwear that was so comfortable you didn't feel it when you wore it. So that was the idea of Naked. So comfortable, it feels like nothing at all. And that started out as an idea that I'd had when I was traveling in Peru. It went on Canada's version of Shark Tank, where I got absolutely torched. And then eventually it grew. We raised millions of dollars. We put the product in every major department store, uplisted it onto the NASDAQ, and then divested it in 2018. And I actually believe since then, the Naked Underwear still exists as a holding company that holds lots of different brands. But my particular brand that I started was sold to an Italian company. And so it's kind of strange. I have no idea where to find the product that I created, but I know it's out there in the world.
But sometimes when I looked up naked underwears and all that, I was thinking, was there a crisis of underwears, or was there a different way to portray underwears? I mean, explain that, because it just seems like that we're running out of ideas and we just came up with something new.
Right. I mean, that's how we do it, right? So for the entrepreneurs out there, there's really 3 reasons that we would start a business, right?
Yeah.
Reason number 1 is we have a problem that we want to solve.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
and to the point that you just made, that problem might be there's a crisis of underwear. In other words, there's not good enough underwear. And that was in part the case of Naked. The second piece is that we're really, really passionate about something.
Mm-hmm.
So we want to do that. And the third piece is we're just sort of building ourselves a job.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we have maybe a talent. It's not necessarily something that's we're totally passionate about, or that there's totally a problem that needs to be solved. And what I mean by problem needs to be solved is somebody hasn't done it yet, right? It's wide open space
Yeah.
versus starting a business in an area that's competitive, but you're starting it anyway because you know you can kind of wedge yourself into that market. So those are three reasons. When I started Naked Underwear, your options for underwear were like Jockey, Stanfield, Calvin Klein, Fruit of the Loom,
Mm-hmm.
and a handful of others. When women had this like plethora of amazing underwear, and at the time, I wasn't the only person to notice this. We're like, men deserve better. Men deserve better underwear. And now it's men deserve better, you know, skincare and all these different things. We're just catching up to women in this regard. But it shows you like when the world sees that there's a hole, when we launched Naked, over the course of like 5 years, like 500 different men's underwear lines launched. So everybody was seeing that need to come in and kind of take out Calvin Klein as the only premium option.
So when you came up with this book,
Yeah.
and the book is called Getting Naked,
Mm-hmm.
why getting naked? Actually, you're wearing something. Why get naked?
Yeah, right. That's a it's a double entendre to the underwear Naked,
Yeah.
and the idea of building this business is getting naked, getting this business to a place where it's viable and it's sold and all of that. But the second piece is the word naked in its sense of getting back to who we are
Mm.
as people, getting back to our truths, getting back to ourselves, and
Mm.
how the entrepreneurial journey can serve as a path to face obstacles within yourself, face your fears, face your negative patterns, face the things that the mistakes that you make, and excuse me, and become this best version of yourself,
Mm.
you know, and become this version of yourself that's operating true to who you are and what you want to do and who you want to be and how you want to show up in this world. And so that's the other reason we called it Getting Naked.
So, do you think? Well, let me. I'll get back to that later. But is there a traveling company also that you have?
Yeah, yeah.
And actually, I went online. Then I actually saw a picture of you and your family walking down the street. So explain that journey.
Yeah, there's so many things here. I do a lot. Although I am trying to get back to basics too, Christian, which we can talk about later. But when I sold Naked,
Mm-hmm.
the next business I started was a company called Kosan Travel. Again, thinking there was a problem that needed to be solved. So there was something like 350 millennials traveling, and there was no identifiable travel brand in the market for those millennials.
Mm-hmm.
You had athleisure, and then you had all these sort of baby boomer brands like Tilly and Eddie Bauer and stuff, but there was nothing speaking to that mass amount of millennials who were traveling and being digitally nomadic with their lives. And so we wanted to create a company for them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, we didn't factor in COVID-19 shutting down travel for almost 18 months now,
Mm-hmm.
but that's okay. Those types of things you can find ways to pivot around. And simultaneous was I had two little girls, as you can see in the photo you've put down there, Garish, and we we were looking at the world, and this was sort of the same as Kosan. We said, there's a lot of violence, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of suspicion out there, and how do we teach ourselves to look at the world sort of unconditionally
Mm-hmm.
and see the world as a global community? And our view was the best way to do that was through travel. and not building walls and different things like that. And so simultaneous to starting Kosan, I also shot a film with my family called Raising Global Citizens.
Yes.
And it was about the importance of traveling with children and to help them understand they're the citizens of the world. And even though our traditions are different and we may look a bit different, deep down, we all love, we all hurt, we all have fear, we all want to provide for our families. That basic humanness is good and we all share it. That picture that you have there's in Ho Chi Minh.
Mm.
Yeah.
But so, Joel, I know that when we're entrepreneurship, we want to make money, we want to make fame, we want to, do all other things that rich people do. Okay. But sometimes we tend to forget what the basics are, what we're trying to do instead of getting to the goal. And I think the way you brought up a book about yourself and the nakedness of that book, and then traveling with your family, I think it's good that you went to the basics of that. Do you agree with that? Or do you think, was there a change of your life? Now I think I'm here and I'm done. What was your thought process on that?
If I understand your question correctly, you're asking what the why I thought I was not done after the first business, or
Yeah, so it seems like you've done enough. You got
hell yeah.
what you got, and now it seems like you want to reinvent yourself by traveling, I guess. Is
Yeah, I think that is the curiosity and the wonderful mystery of being a human is you're not ever done. You're not ever done growing as a human being. You're not ever done facing challenges and obstacles,
Mhm.
both internally and expert, that you have to face.
Yeah,
There's this great proverb that says, "Behind mountains, there's more mountains."
yeah,
So you don't get to the land of no more life to live in the sense of the thing facing growth. And so what has to change along the way, Gersh, is why are you doing the thing that you're doing,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So if for instance money is my only motivator,
Hmm.
and there will never be enough money,
Yeah,
you never make enough money,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
There's always somebody richer, there's always somebody who has a better car.
yeah,
But if the motive is I just want to see what I can do, but whether I fail or whether I don't, I want to test myself
mm,
as a human being so that I can, as I'm going through my life, create myself and free myself from all the baggage. We just keep creating. And as long as you're again creating from a healthy place, then you keep going
yeah.
and you don't stop. I mean, this podcast for you. When did you start it?
Um, I've always wanted to start it, never started, and I think it happened during COVID. It just pushed me, and I
Yeah.
said, you know what? That I think we tend to forget, we tend to forget the basics of life,
Yeah.
and I think I got so busy in my life. I said, you know what? Let me just sit down and relax and start talking to people, start understanding my root of the reasoning why we're here, and I
Mhm.
think yeah, that was my calling. I think that was my calling, and I think I'm here because of that.
Yeah.
And I met beautiful people, including you, and it's just amazing how just one idea comes in my head, and I'm here.
Exactly, right? And that's always going to happen.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no there. We're here for not very long.
No, not very
And
long. The life is very short, actually.
and so why not just explore it, right?
So Joel, let me talk to you about theories. Okay, what people are thinking about entrepreneurship. Okay, this is what I come up with. I'm pretty sure there are other theories out there. But the five theories, I think what people are talking about is innovation, economics, sociology, psychology, and leadership. Okay. And I think I'm going to break it down a little. if that's okay with you.
That's okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the first we're going to talk about is innovation. Okay. Now, were you just born to be in entrepreneurship, or did you find something that you want to fix or get an idea? So what's the correct answer for that question?
Yeah, I mean, for me, so there's two places there, right? I did find something I wanted to fix, right? But because I had an entrepreneurial spirit, I was prepared to take the risks associated with trying to fix that thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? So what does that mean? That means that to the cost of doing anything, and this is I think a Henry David Thoreau quote, is the amount of life in which you're willing to exchange
Mm-hmm.
for
Mm-hmm.
doing that thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we're going to birth an idea into the world, there's a cost. That cost is our time. That cost is potentially financial, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's potentially cost risk to starting it.
Mm-hmm.
That time is or that cost is social. Our relationships can suffer if all our attention goes to like one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so somebody has to be prepared to do those things as a trade-off for innovating an idea that's landed on them.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that there's wanting to solve a problem is a big thing for people, but also just the innovation of just creating, right? So if you're a musician, you're not solving a problem for somebody other than you're giving them they want good music and you're providing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're framing it as a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But people innovate, they create music because there's this need inside so many of us
Mm-hmm.
to create.
Mm-hmm.
And so, whether I like to frame it as both.
Mm-hmm.
You're either solving a problem or you're creating something out of pure passion as art. And those are the two sort of, if you're for your first point, innovation and what calls us to take that step into the unknown of entrepreneurship, right?
Mm-hmm.
The unknown of, will somebody actually want this thing? Will somebody enjoy my music? Will somebody use this product, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
When it comes to music, I think the only solution for me for music is if the other person is gonna get goosebumps or not, because
yeah.
that's a sign of music. That's a sign of touching the other person musically.
But is it enough, Gersh, if it gives yourself goosebumps? If you felt really good
Yeah,
about the thing that you created,
yeah,
and that was enough. It didn't. The other part was a bonus.
yes,
That was the best part about it, right? And
yeah,
that's where people have to, because if you're creating from the standpoint that somebody else has to, again, financially a business has to be viable, right? So you
sure,
do have that product market
sure,
fit.
sure,
But if you're creating something because you believe it needs to be created or you want to create it, you can't care what other people think. You
yeah,
can't care if it affects someone they think it's the best thing ever made, because that's creating to please somebody else,
yeah,
right? The first person you're trying to satisfy is this thing inside me that wants to put this in the world, and then it's out of your control,
yeah.
right?
Well, the other two part with this innovation is all about self motivation and natural imagination. You gotta come up with something new. You gotta imagine something new. But with this whole thing, this will fail if there's no self motivation.
Yeah.
So I think you were, yes, we were talking about underwear, but that was your self motivation that you want to make to the next step for men.
Yeah.
And I said, you know what? How is it going to make men feel better for themselves? You know, ladies, they have makeup, they have everything else, but men, they only have watches and perfume, or I should say cologne, right? So yeah, so you came up with something new. So that's your innovation. So now the other part of the theory is economics.
Yeah.
It's a tough topic if you think about it, because how do you build capital? That's for one, because you know what? When you're entrepreneurship, you need money to start up something. Or do you have someone to help you? Because I don't know how to answer that question. So you tell me on that part.
Yeah. Uh, so I always say that at the end of the day, we do have to make money because
Yeah.
we live in a world that revolves around money as the one connecting mechanism that puts food on our table, gas in our, charges our electric cars, it puts gas in our tanks, et cetera, right? So money is important to get a basic quality of life, right? And so you have to look at it and frame it as, how am I going to get to a basic quality of life while I'm innovating as an entrepreneur, so that I can then put myself in a position to make, hopefully, a lot of money as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that, what I mean by that is, when you're starting your business, do you have a second job? Do you have a side hustle? Do you have passive investments? Like, what are the different pieces um, that you put in place financially that allow you to provide for yourself, for your family, for your community, for your society, et cetera, financially? And then once that's met, everything else you build from there, that you're shooting towards from there, is well, it's dependent on you. I always say, as an entrepreneur, have a number, right, that you're targeting.
Mm-hmm.
Build intentionality into, okay, I'm going to do this and I'm going to be passionate about this. And there's a number that I'm targeting. And if I hit that number, I am prepared to walk away, or I'm prepared to sell the business, or not try and give up any more of my life to build the thing once it gets to this certain place. And that's to give you a really strategic goalpost, right? We all want to become billionaires and have, unicorn type exits
Yeah.
with our companies. But realistically, I think that there's a much smaller number that we should be shooting for, and then we can reassess what we want to do with our lives from there.
Yeah. I mean,
And
I mean, it's a good point. I mean, don't say that I'm gonna be 10 million person, $10 million target. Be realistic and be true to yourself, because it could be a failure. Whatever you're.
absolutely,
Yeah.
right? So, and the whole point of that exercise that I'm talking about is yes, to be grounded in reality. You can always reassess once you hit a platform and say,
Yes.
what's the next platform?
Exactly.
But it gives you a basis to work back from. Okay, so if you're trying to raise money to start your business, hypothetically, you're diluting, for those who don't know, you're diluting your own interest, right?
Yeah.
Inside your company. So
Mm-hmm.
if you needed $1 million, and that $1 million costed you 50% of ownership in your business for somebody to put that money in, now you own a lot less of your business.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything changes. You now have somebody else, you have a fiduciary responsibility to. You have to provide that person an exit, whether that's through paying them dividends, selling the company, or giving them liquidity via a stock market.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but taking on that capital should theoretically help your business scale faster, get
Mm-hmm.
to a point where its value is greater. So therefore, you both have bigger pieces of the pie, even though you gave up,
Yeah.
from a number standpoint, even though you gave up ownership. But what often ends up happening is then you need to raise more money and more money as you grow in your dilution, and you're diluted down and down. But hopefully, the value of your company is increasing. So there's so many ways to do it these days. You can crowdsource, your idea via a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo. You can try and self-fund, because it's so economical to start a website and start a consumer product online these days, that you might not need investment
Mm-hmm.
until you've proven your concept out.
Yeah.
You think that there's real scale, or your idea is so innovative that it's going to cost a fortune to build it out, and you need to raise money really, really early on. And I talk a lot about this in the book, Gersh, is like, you just have to know what end game you're looking for, and what you're trying to build along the way.
Mm.
It is, by principle, usually better to use other people's money to fund your own business, to diversify or dilute your own risk,
Mm-hmm.
as well as you know, give yourself enough capital to scale. But at the same time, there's always another side to it. And once you have shareholders, you have a lot more responsibility than you did when you were just running, you know, your own show in terms of, so.
Yeah, so Joel, I mean, I saw one of the episodes of Shark Tank this season, and one of the guys, I forget the idea that he came up with, but the comments were quite funny. So he came in and he says, "My evaluation is 100K and my evaluation is 10%. So what is that? That, you know, right?" So he's like, Mark came up and he says, "I don't think it is." And he's like, "Okay, so you tell me what the evaluation is."
Mm.
So my thought process is the person who's doing the business and who's selling and who wants sharks, don't you think he or she should know what his evaluation is and stick to that gun instead of saying I need to step down a little? Or what do you think?
Yeah. I mean, that's what one of the things I got torched on,
Yeah,
was not understanding valuation, right?
yeah,
So for your listeners who don't understand valuation, you're you're saying, when you're going to an investor, let's say, Gersh, I'm going to have you invest in my company,
mm-hmm,
okay? And you said, and I said I needed 100 grand from you,
yeah,
and I'm going to give you 10% of my company for that 100 grand.
mm-hmm,
Well, that means that I'm valuing my company and my idea at $1 million.
mm-hmm,
Okay. But let's say I only have 100 grand in sales
mm-hmm,
at the time, right?
mm-hmm,
There's 100 grand coming into the till every year.
mm-hmm,
So I'm valuing my company, the future potential of my company, right then at 10 times its existing business. So then the investor has to ask the question, okay, so if I'm investing at $1 million valuation, which is 10 times the current sales of the company,
mm-hmm.
I'm anticipating that at the very least, this guy gets to 10 million in sales, so that, you know, or a million in sales, so that somebody puts future value on that number, you know,
Yeah,
so now it's, you know, it's 5 times that. And in the beginning, the value is higher.
mm-hmm,
But as your business matures, brings in more and more revenue, its explosive scalability for growth diminishes, and therefore so does your future, you know, the future value an investor is willing to give you.
mm-hmm,
Some companies, like if you just look at the apparel industry, like Lululemon is
mm-hmm.
still trading at ridiculously high multiples of revenue,
Yes,
right? Like I think as high as 10 times
it's time. Yeah,
consistently. Whereas most other apparel companies that are that mature, you know, Lululemon's been around for 20, 25 years, um, they're more likely trading at 2 times their revenue as future value, you know, and then in the middle for a lot of us, it's sort of 3 to 4, and that's apparel. This is not tech. Every sector has a different possibility. You know, adventure scale is like, this thing's going to, you know, this idea is going to sell out at, you know, 10 times, 100 times, whatever, you know.
yes,
And so, yeah, how you understand that is you understand, you go look at your competitors in the space and try and find whether they're a public company, what it will literally tell you, how many times this company's trading above its revenue, or you look at who sold to who.
mm,
And that puts you, because those investors know it. The
yeah,
sharks know it.
yeah,
That's why he probably, in some of these cases, it's like, well, I missed that. So you just tell me what's realistic, because they know what's realistic, but also there's this dynamic that, well, they're also trying to get the best deal they can,
yeah,
always,
always,
for their money.
always, yeah,
And so you do have to play that game, and you're trying to hold on to as much ownership as you can. You're going to value your idea more. And but you know, the market is just what two people are willing to transact on, what somebody's willing to sell and what somebody's willing to buy, whether that's a valuation or that's a widget.
mm,
It's still just two people making that decision. So as much fundamentals as you might be able to point to, and comps you might be able to point to, ultimately you still have to convince the buyer of, you know,
yeah,
what you have
yeah,
at the price you have it. So
yeah. So Joel, the other theory, thank you for that, by the way. So the other theory that I came up with is sociology.
Yeah.
So let's start about the next theory here. The next theory is going to be sociological theory. Now, social attitudes, what does that mean? Society values, what does that mean? We're talking about people's thought process of do they need this product or not?
Mm.
How do you learn people's thought process when it comes to, I guess, selling, or do we just take a risk?
Mhm. I'd never advise just taking a risk on selling a product unless you're not you don't care about losing money, or you're just doing it because you want to do it, you love it.
Yeah.
But you're talking about investing a lot of your your capital, putting it at risk, putting other people's capital at risk. You need to be really certain,
Yeah.
as certain as you can, that you have a shot. Now, there's no guarantee, right? At the
Right.
end of the day,
Right.
because even if you nailed, so what this is what's called product market fit, which means that you've created a product that fits a market. So
Mm-hmm.
that market being, you're in New Jersey, people 50 years and older in New Jersey. Um, that's potentially a market wanting this thing. And fit being you priced it accordingly to what that market's willing to pay, and it's timed accordingly so that that product is relevant to what they're looking for at the time, right? So to use a really simple example, let's assume that electric cars were possible 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
That does not mean, even if they were possible, with gas prices being whatever they were, 10 cents a liter. I'm Canadian, so we go by the liter.
Yeah.
Um, you know, 15, 20 cents a liter, whatever, 25 years ago, that people's mindset was right there for an electric car. So even if it was a better idea for the environment, it was cheaper, it was possible, it doesn't necessarily mean that the timing was right for
Mm-hmm.
that market, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But a whole bunch of factors being, the rising price of gas, the rhetoric around environmental concerns with the ozone, and all these different things, and global warming have changed the mindset of the consumer. So now everybody's ready for electric cars, or almost everybody, right?
Almost everyone. Yep.
Yeah. So and not everyone will, with the exception of the smartphone, very rarely or social media, very rarely are there products that everybody is ready for, right? You're just looking for your market. And so you do what's called product market testing. So to use the travel dress as an example, we saw that there was millennials traveling. So there's a demographic, and that demographic has a bunch of information about them, their likes, how they like to live their lives, how their minds work, etc. And you look at that and you say, okay, who's playing in that space? In our case, there was nobody playing in that space specifically as a travel brand. There was lots of other products that were just grabbing market share from it. So it looked like there was a white space opportunity. Then we did a lot of SEO research to say, what are these millennial travelers looking for?
Mm.
Well, the number one thing that they were looking for was travel dresses. There was plenty of bags on the market at the time and other things, but travel dresses for the millennial female in our demographic, she was searching for it. And when they're searching for it, it tells you that they don't have a defined answer. They don't
Mm.
have a defined brand as to, if I said I'm going to go buy um, hiking gear, Patagonia is the first brand I'm going to look at. But if I don't know, then I'm just going to broadly search it. So we took that theory and we said, okay, number one travel search term in apparel's travel dresses. Let's go there. Let's see what these women are willing to pay. And we created this, using tons of surveys. What features and benefits do they want? What are they looking for? We created this product that did $1 million in sales on Kickstarter in 30 days. It did $1 million in sales in 30 days because it had product market fit. And when you have product market fit, you can scale that product much more predictably, much more inexpensively, or profitably than you can a product that you're just scouring the world to find someone who's looking for that thing that you need. So, yeah, but again, 25 years ago, a travel dress might not have been the thing people wanted.
Yeah.
In the same way, obviously, people always travel, but the point is just, does that product meet what the market is looking for today? We lived in a world 2 years ago, and I believe we're going to go back there, where millennials were prioritizing travel above everything else in their lives, above buying a home, above owning a car, etc. And so something that spoke to their needs, their as an entire generation, worked, and that's
You
what
know,
we always have to look
you know,
at.
you brought up a good point because you and I we grew up with thinking that when we graduate today, we're gonna go and get a car,
Hmm.
or and this is my target. We're gonna get a $30,000 car.
Hmm.
But millennials nowadays are thinking, you know what? We don't need a car. We got Uber, we got Lyft. Why do we need a car? So I think the thought process of the society is a little changing. I don't know if it is a good change, but it's changing.
But it's always going to change. It's never static, right?
No,
It's
it's
never
never static.
so that's the thing as an entrepreneur, is you always have to adapt your product, your service, whatever it is that you're selling through the business that you're running, to the world around you that's changing, right?
Yeah.
If you just think you've hit it and you're done, you might have a good few years. There's always nice, windows of time where things are very consistent, but then you have to adapt.
Yeah, yeah. So that actually covers the sociology theory and the psychology because that's more of a human behavior and emotion of how we're all thinking. So I think we have answered two of the theories in that part, Joel. So thank you for that. So the last theory that I have, it's a tough one: leadership.
Okay.
Not everyone is a leader when they're coming out with entrepreneurship. For example, I'll give you an example for myself. I've always been a follower, I've never been a leader.
Yeah.
But slowly I'm becoming a leader. Do you think we need to change the thought process of how to do business or decision making? Uh what are your thoughts on that?
We should always seek to improve our own selves professionally and personally. And if leadership is a weakness, we can look to improve on our leadership qualities.
Yeah.
Um, and that doesn't mean that we're all going to be incredible leaders like you. I'm not, and taking the word leader and sort of spinning out the word manager out of it, if we're
Yeah.
talking about business
Yeah.
and entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Management is a skill. Now
Yeah.
it is a skill that can be developed, and some people have it in spades and some people don't. And so I always say that the idea of leadership in a company, if you're not a great manager, is about being a good listener, is about being fair, is about supporting the interests of not just your company, but your employees and the people you work with, and making sure that their lives are okay as well as their work is okay, and they're growing as individuals, and that you're representing the foundational beliefs of your brand or your company,
Mm-hmm.
and you're making sure people stick to the guiding principles, these sort of intrinsic rules that govern your organization individually and uniquely from other organizations. But that if you're not a very good manager, you need to just hire that if you can. You need to bring somebody in who's a good manager to manage. Like I always say, or always ask the question, not how can I do this, but who can do this
Who can do this?
better than me? And then remove my ego out of the equation and bring in the people who can do it better than me. Again, not pretending I don't have to learn how to be a better manager or a better leader, etc. But knowing that if there are people who do it better, put those people in place to help manage your company.
Yeah, the thought process for entrepreneurship that I come up with is you're managing people below you, but you're getting direction from above you. Now, as entrepreneurship, your above you is the people around you who's giving you feedback of what the company should be. You think that's a good analogy that I came up with on that part? Or
I think it's fair. Yeah. I mean, there's so many people around you, right? That especially if you're a first or second time entrepreneur, if you're Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos, those guys are entrepreneurs, but they're they're the top of the food chain in many respects. Whereas if you're a young entrepreneur, you're very much, every single person is bringing something to the table that is maybe even above where you are, right? And so you're looking around you. The only other thing I would add to that is that you will, especially if you've taken on um, investors, you might have a board of directors that you report to.
Mhm.
So in that case, you do have a quasi manager even early on. But yeah, I mean, I like looking at it. I don't like looking at it top down. I think that's a great way of talking about it, Girish.
Yeah. So, Joel, one quick thing, and it's going to be a fun question if you don't mind. So, I was watching one of the videos that you were interviewing, and or get interviewed, I should say. There was a question with three parts to it.
Mhm.
What are the lessons learned from this whole entire process of getting naked for you?
Yeah, the lesson, there's so many, Girish, and that's the point. But the biggest lesson that I've learned is, personally, and some people agree with this and some people don't, is that our business is, or our entrepreneurship is a vehicle of self-discovery, where we have we can look at everything that we face and we go through in our day-to-day life as entrepreneurs as chances to become stronger human beings, to, when we face new obstacles, bring the lessons that we've learned from past obstacles and apply them so that our lives become they flow better. Things don't derail us in the same way that they used to. We're not always in our heads in the same, in the ways that we have been in the past, that we understand ourselves and we understand where our reactions come from and where our emotions, as part of those reactions, that they come from and how they play out in the different scenarios of our lives, so that we don't perpetuate bad things and negative things. We know how to stop those spirals before they happen,
Hmm.
and ultimately have a happier existence. I don't think that the business itself matters as much. I think that, because I've learned that business is quite a fleeting thing.
Hmm.
You have your business one day, you don't. Maybe it went over, maybe it got bought out. It's always changing. The product that you made, you need to modify it. The demographic that you were selling to changed its preferences, and you have to keep modifying and modifying and modifying. So it's actually something that we have to do a lot of letting go of,
Hmm.
not a lot of holding on to. And so when we make that shift in our mindset to let go and just adapt and move as it happens, and be okay with things that come and go, I think we ultimately end up in a much better place.
Hmm.
And we're a lot happier for it.
Oh, cool. Joel, thank you so much for that. So, um, any good book or video or article that you recommend? And this is a
Um,
test because I've seen one of the interviews and I hope you give that same answer. If you don't, it's fine.
well, so to answer the question, do you want an entrepreneurial book, or do you want sort of a
Any,
personal
any,
develop,
any, any,
personal
any,
development book?
any book that you recommend.
But I mean, I recommend.
Obviously, your book.
I know I'm not going to shamelessly plug that. I love. I mean, I'm going to do a few, Garish. You're going to have to. I love Awareness by Anthony DeMello.
Mm-hmm.
I love Way of Superior Man by David Dida. Um, I love Finger Pointing to the Moon by Dr. Jason Gordon. I love Radical Acceptance by Tara Brach. I love these books that challenge us to rethink. I think about the way that we see the world, and so the best example of this is like there's this story. Do I have a moment to share a very brief story?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
So it's not my story, but there's this story of this camel trader, and he's got his caravan, and they're heading through the deserts, and he's got the people who he works with, and they're setting up camp for the night. It's time to set up camp, and so the workers who are with him are tying up the different camels, and they say that oh gosh, we're short one tie. We don't have one tie to tie up this last camel. And the leader of the caravan, the businessman, says, "Don't worry about it. Just pretend to tie up the camel. Right? Camels are dumb animals. He'll think he's tied up."
Mm.
So they just pretend to tie up the camel, and at the end of he doesn't go anywhere. He thinks he's tied up, and so the next morning they've taken down their camp and they're about to hit the road again, and they've untied all the camels, but the one camel that wasn't tied isn't budging. It's not joining the caravan. And they go to the boss, the businessman. They say, "How come he's not going?" And they're like, "You forgot to untie him
Mm.
and pretend he's not really tied."
Mm.
And so a lot of these books and a lot of the work that I do now focuses on that idea of invisible tethers. So think about the metaphor of this camel it wasn't tied up, but he thought he was.
Mm.
And in our life, there's so many invisible tethers, things that we think to be true about who we are, what we're capable of, how we're gonna, how we can be in the world, how we can achieve what we want, because there's so many biases and concepts that we've been fed as we've gone through life that we've just accepted them. But when we realize that they're not really there,
Mm.
just words and somebody else's opinions and different things like that, we can untether ourselves to
Mm.
become who we want to become. And it's just about recognizing where in yourself those things are, those invisible tethers are. And so that's sort of the theme that I've spent a lot of time with over the last 5 years.
Mm. Well, there's one book that I recommend, and you recommended it actually. It's called As a Man Thinketh by James
Oh yeah,
Allen.
yeah, yeah.
That was a good book actually. I read it after you mentioned it, and it was a good insight to that book.
Yeah, As a Man Thinketh is one of the original law of attraction books.
Yeah.
And it's very much tied into this idea of invisible tethers.
Yeah.
When you change the way you think, you change your relationship with the world. The material world, the spiritual world, all of those things. And James Allen was the gentleman who wrote that book way back in the 1880 or something like that.
I think it was 1903. I think
1903. Okay, little newer.
uh-huh.
But a lot of that stuff, The Secret and the law of attraction, kind of comes from him and Wallace T. Wattles, which is the science. Wallace T. Wattles is the science of getting rich, I think.
Hmm. Yeah.
But science is a mental.
It's a mental thing. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Joel, for coming on my show, and hopefully you enjoyed as much as I did. For learning all about entrepreneurship and your journey and how we should get naked.
Thank you for having me, Gersh.
Yeah.
Appreciate the questions.
No,
that conversation.
Thank you again, Joel, for coming. So, guys, we spoke with Joel. We spoke about getting naked. We talked about entrepreneurship, and we talked about that not everyone is up to entrepreneurship. Just keep in mind, it's all about financial. It's all about leadership. It's all about learning the new things and old things and how we should let go and all that stuff. So keep that in mind. So as usual, as always, there is a quote of the day and that I always come up with, and we all know that Back to Basic comes with quote of the day. And the quote of the day is going to be, I knew that if I failed, I wouldn't regret that, but I knew one day, one thing I might regret is not trying. Entrepreneurship is always about trying new things. It could fail, it could succeed, but you should always try. And that's what Joel did. He tried to get naked. Well, you know what I mean. He got naked. Well, anyway, guys, as usual, as always, please listen, please subscribe to Back to Basics. And as always, as I say, remember, everything in life goes back to basics. And that's what we did today, guys. Guys, you take care. God bless. See you next week. Keep on subscribing, commenting as much as you can. Give me love as much as you can. God bless. Take care. Next week's episode on Back to Basics. Hey guys, my name is Girish Bali, the host for Back to Basics. Now, we have been giving you a teaser of the next week's episode at the end of each episode. But today we're going to do something different. We are going to tell you that July, month of July, from the 5th to the 30th of July, we will be releasing every day. Now, on Mondays, it's going to be my solo show, like you always listen to my Monday thoughts. Tuesday is going to be about technology, business, and marketing. Wednesdays is going to be about Wisdom Wednesdays, motivational speakers, authors. Thursdays is going to be about trending items. So it could be about anything trending at that period of time. And then on Fridays is all about fitness, health, and nutrition. So keep on following me on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, and keep on following me and see what new things are there. Go to my website also at backtobasicmode.com. Subscribe to it. You'll get some email marketing also as what new things are happening to Back to Basics. So give me all the love and support as much as you can. And just remember, everything in life goes back to basics, and that's what we did. Guys, take care, God bless, and I'll see you, I guess, month of July every day. So take care, God bless.